Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Our topic for today is olive oil with Dr. Rick Mayfield. Many of us have heard that olive oil is healthy. It has a lot of benefits. It's good for our heart health. We know that olive oil is an important component in the Mediterranean diet, and the Mediterranean diet has had an impressive amount of scientific studies showing that it's associated with greater health. It has protection against cardiovascular disease. It's beneficial for brain health. It even has anti-cancer properties. So what is it about olive oil? Well, we know that olive oil contains primarily omega-9 oils, also known as oleic acid. And there's a certain amount of scientific data showing that this type of fat is beneficial. And then depending upon how the olive oil is produced, it may have more or less polyphenols. And much of the recent research is indicating that these polyphenols, or some people refer to them as phenols, are responsible for a lot of the health benefits of the olive oil. And polyphenols are antioxidants, natural phytonutrients that are present in olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil. But we have many questions about olive oil. What is the best olive oil? I'd like to drill down a little more on exactly some of the health benefits and how olive oil promotes cardiovascular health, et cetera. And we'd also like to know about the polyphenols and how do we determine if an olive oil has a lot of polyphenols, is it okay to cook with olive oil? So these are some of the questions we have. And so I've asked Dr. Rick Mayfield to come on to help give us some additional information about olive oil. And Dr. Rick Mayfield is a doctor of chiropractic, and he's double board certified in clinical nutrition. He's also certified in functional medicine through the Institute of Functional Medicine. And he's currently the director of the Center for Wellbeing in Edina, Minnesota. Dr. Mayfield, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, Dr. Ben.
Great. So maybe you could tell us how olive oil became a topic of interest for you.
Well, it all started about 2009, 2010, when I was asked to join the Institute for Functional Medicine as a faculty member to teach detoxification and biotransformation. And so they gave me an open book to say, create your own deck, and we want it to be science-based. So I spent 6 months creating my major deck. So we had 3 major decks, and one of the big decks was on phytonutrients. So I've always been obsessed or somewhat quite interested in phytonutrients and phytochemicals because they're the active ingredients in plants. And all the research for the previous, let's say 25 years have been exploding about phytochemicals in terms of what they do, how they benefit our health. We all know we should be eating our vegetables. Grandmother told us.
By the way, for those who don't know, phytochemicals are particular compounds found in plants that have important benefits, and they're beyond vitamins and minerals.
It's like when you look at a vegetable, you see green, red, purple, orange, and so forth. Those pigments are phytochemicals. So when you look at a berry, that dark purple are called anthocyanidins. So there are different names for these chemicals. And these are the active ingredients. And so we've known for centuries, well, I'd say decades, that eating your vegetables and your fruits are really healthy for you, even though most of us have not done that historically. But we know that beginning in about the 1970s, they started looking at more about these phytochemicals. And it's evolved to the point now where most of the research that I read, which is about 5 hours a day, is involved phytochemicals because that's where the action is. And while we need our macronutrients like proteins and fats and carbohydrates and minerals and vitamins, it's the phytochemicals that really make the cells healthy and anti-disease. So I got involved in olive oil because it kept coming up on my radar in terms of doing the research showing, well, these ingredients in olives are really strong agents to produce a protein called glutathione. And glutathione is our master antioxidant in all of our cells that sweeps out free radicals or oxidized agents. It also sweeps out heavy metals and other chemicals out of the body. So I started looking at this a little closer, and it evolved into a complete database search of everything I could read about olive oil. And now I'm definitely an olive oil kind of nut job now. I really love everything about olives because the science is there. Initially, the science came through what's called epidemiology, looking at population-based studies. People in the Mediterranean basin who are eating and drinking olive oil had less heart disease, and that's how it became known as the Mediterranean diet, largely because it was cardioprotective. So it turns out that the chemicals within olives have these phytochemicals. They're really the smoking gun. Now, when you look at, say, neuroprotective, or you mentioned helping your brain health, we know that the olive oil itself, the oil, the oleic acid, the monounsaturated fatty acid, actually stabilizes the neuron membranes, your brain cells. The walls of the cells become more stabilized with omega-9 fatty acids. So that in itself is neuroprotective. But taking that a step further, it's about these phytochemicals. So there's 36 different phenols or polyphenols within olives. And the most important one is called oleuropein. Oleuropein, like most phytochemicals in our foods, is swallowed through our diet, and our microbiota, our bacteria, our flora in our gut, then process this oleuropein into metabolites, and then we absorb these metabolites. That's when you eat a berry, for example, you absorb not the berry itself, but the metabolites produced by these bacteria that break it down. Same thing with olives. So when you ingest a olive oil that has phytochemicals, you're actually ingesting oleuropein primarily, and that's broken down to what's called hydroxytyrosol and tyrosol.
By the way, can you spell oleuropein?
Yeah, oleuropein is Oleuropein, oleuropein. And hydroxytyrosol is hydroxytyrosol. That is one of the key phytochemicals or phenols within olive oil or olives itself. Now, it turns out that hydroxytyrosol and tyrosol is providing most of the benefits, not all of them, but most of the benefits that we'll talk about further. Now, there's different kinds of olives, just like there's different kinds of grapes that produce different kinds of wines. There's different kinds of olives that produce different flavors and different taste and different constituents or content of olive oil. So when you look in the database of what's highest phenol content, like hydroxytyrosol, there's 3 or 4 varieties that come up the most frequently in the database. And so when I choose olive oils, I'm trying to find those olive oil products that have those kind of variety or varietals. Now there's well over 150 different olive oil varietals, and most labels will not identify what kind of olive this is coming from. So it's very few products will actually have it on the label, except for those coming out of the Mediterranean basin. Most of those will, like say from Spain. Spain has a very high concentration of a varietal called Picual. It's Picual, Picual. And Picual is very high in hydroxytyrosol. It's very high, or oleuropein. It's very high in these highly concentrated active ingredients. So I will choose an oil from Spain, trying to find an orchard or a mill that will have right on the label, 100% Picual or a very high percentage of Picual varietal. So if I go to your local Walmart or your local Costco or even to a local health food store, you won't find this on the label largely. It's really rare to find this on a label here in the United States. So I'll come back to how we search out these oils, but there's other varietals as well that are very high in these phenols, One is from Greece. And it's also from Crete, the island of Crete. Greece has a common oil varietal called Koroniki. That's with a K. It's Koroneki, Koroniki. And Koroniki and Coratina from Italy, that's with a C, Coratina, just like it sounds. Those three, Koroniki, Coratina, and Picual from Spain, are consistently high in polyphenol content. So I'll primarily look for oils that are coming from those countries that will label their bottle as such. Now, there are many other varietals, as I mentioned. There's another one from Spain that I use that I've come into, and I'll come back to that. That's really exciting for neuron health and brain health. It's a totally different variety. But when we go to looking for the right kind of olive oil, I can go to a website like oliveoillovers.com. That's what it's called, oliveoillovers.com. I can even go to Amazon and type in the search words Picual, Koroniki, or Coratina, extra virgin olive oil, and up comes a whole list of different oils that are ready to go for you. You can actually start reading about them. Some of them will not say Picual on the label, but many of them do.
And Picual is a type of olive, right?
It's a type of olive. That's correct. Just like Koroniki is a type of olive from Greece and Crete and the surrounding area.
What about Tunisia as a country for olive oil? Because I know Dr. Gundry sells a high polyphenol olive oil that comes from, I think it's from Tunisia.
Yes. There's different countries. I buy one from the West Bank near Israel in Palestine area. It's really high in phenol content. It's not a Koroniki, it's not a Picual, it's not a Coratina. So there are different varietals in different Mediterranean basin areas. So I'm looking at the strongest research we have are on those three varietals. There's other countries that are producing, like Tunisia. I like Tunisian oils as well. They taste well. For me, a lot of it's about taste. And many times the higher the phenol content, the more bitter it's going to taste. It's a little more pungent, a little more peppery. And you can tell when you put the oil in your mouth and just let it sit there, you can go, okay, yeah, this has got a little bite to it. That's the phenols. That's the chemical content. It's not because it's rancid.
And I think Americans have a tendency to want their oil not to have any taste. And so we need to resist that tendency, that we need to understand that high polyphenol, healthy olive oil is going to have a little bit of a pungency, a little bit of a kick to it, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Perhaps you can continue on how to buy the best olive oil that's going to give us the most health benefits.
You can go to, if you have a local store that's an olive oil specialty store. I'm in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. We have 4 different olive oil stores, and they sell olive oil that's fresh in a large 3 to 5 gallon bin. And there might be 30 to 50 of these bins, and you can go and they'll list them by the number of potency of phenol from 300 to 800. The higher the number, the higher the phenol content. The International Olive Council Society is trying to standardize our olive oils based on the phenol content. That has not happened yet, but we hope to see that at some time in the future. So when you buy a bottle, it'll have it right on there. So check your local area and see if there's an olive oil store that will sell. They have a variety of olive oils based on their phenol content. Number 2 is
can you find out about the phenol content if you go to the website? I don't know if most of these companies have a website.
Some do. Yeah, some will have it. One of my favorite olive oils is Hypereleon. It's Hypereleon. Hypereleon is an award-winning Greek oil right near Mount Olympus. And it's a different variety. It's called the Olympus varietal. And on their website and in the literature, they'll actually list the number of phenol content. This oil has, for 4 years in a row, the highest recorded phenol content. And it's extremely robust in flavor. And there's 3 different varieties. And they pick their olive early on. So actually it's a green olive before it ripens. And as the olive is maturing, just like an apple or a berry, it goes through various stages of development of phenol content. So they pick their olives at the peak level of certain phenol content. And so this particular olive is grown at high altitude where it has a natural subsoil drainage, it has a lack of water, so it stresses the plant. When the plant becomes stressed, it produces these chemicals. And that's how it is with all foods. So if you stress a spinach plant, you're going to create a higher, phytochemical content in that plant.
Which is one of the reasons why you want to eat organic, because the pesticides actually protect the plant from some of the stress that they'll undergo from, being attacked by pests. And therefore, organic fruits and vegetables are more likely to have a higher level of phytonutrients. I'm assuming organic olive oil probably would have a higher level of polyphenols as well.
Very likely, yes, because they're under higher environmental stress. So depending upon where the olive is grown, the amount of water, the amount of sunlight, and so forth, you're going to get different levels of phenol content.
So is getting organic olive oil important as well to avoid whatever chemicals might be sprayed on the olive tree?
Well, I prefer the organic. It's the only type of oil I buy is organic because I choose to buy organic produce and foods.
I do as well.
Yeah, so that's really, to me, important. There's many non-organic olive oils that are high in phenol content. So they are there. I just don't buy them because I'd rather, if I can avoid chemicals, then why not?
So we've certainly heard reports that there's olive oil being sold in stores that we go to that are fake or non-authentic or have cheaper oils mixed in. How do we avoid that?
Difficult because we don't know. Because there was a study done, I think in 2011. They went to California grocery stores and pulled 60-some different olive oils off the shelf, and they analyzed them. They found cottonseed oil, soybean oil, things that were not olive oil, but it wasn't on the label. You don't know. So I choose not to buy generic, non-labeled where this oil is coming from. That's why I go to the Mediterranean basin to buy my oils. Not to say there's probably good olive oils coming out of California in other countries, but we just don't know. I know there's good olives coming out of South America now. There's very little information on it, but it looks interesting. Looks like they have higher phenol content. We just don't know.
I guess somebody something I read said that in California, they have this certification process that they'll put this certification on the label, and that's something that can provide some trust. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah, that's fairly new in the last few years. So the industry is stepping up.
So where do you get these oils? You buy them through the internet?
I do. I buy them off the net. I buy them off of Amazon.com. I'll buy them off of special olive oil websites. I mentioned one olive oil.
Give your money to the evil empire.
Yeah. I buy quite a few from the oliveoillovers.com because they have a great variety. And you can buy them by country origin. You can buy them by types of olive oils. They don't have necessarily by varietal content, but if you type in the word Coratina into that search engine base, up will come a bunch of Italian oils. So I gravitate to those. And it's really that simple. So if you buy it off Amazon, obviously you get some free shipping if you have that type of Amazon account.
What about some of the brand oils that we see all the time, like, Spectrum oil or, some of the other popular brands you see at, say, Whole Foods or, I shop at our local co-op?
Well, we don't know because they're not labeled. I went to Whole Foods just a couple of weeks ago to look at a particular olive oil that a patient told me about. And there's 1 out of 12 oils, only one had the word Koroniki on it. All the other oils had no source of variety. We didn't know what kind of oil it was, just that it was organic olive oil. So it might be fine as organic olive oil, but I prefer to know where it's coming from.
What if it says it's from a certain country?
Well, we still don't know. I mean, like in Spain, they have dozens of oils, different varietals, species of olives. So they probably are very good oils, and I've tasted many of them. I just prefer ones that are highest in phenol content. We know that the Picual from Spain is an example. So it's readily available. You can, if you search, you can find these pretty readily.
Okay.
My patients do it every day off the internet. So we have a handout in our office. We type all this information up. It's very simple. Type this into a search engine. Here's some websites. They find them.
Okay, cool. I've really been enjoying this discussion, but now I'd like to pause to tell you about the sponsor for this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Pure Encapsulations, which is one of the few lines of professional nutritional supplements that I use in my office. Pure Encapsulations manufactures a complete line of hypoallergenic, research-based dietary supplements. Pure products are meticulously formulated using pure, scientifically tested and validated ingredients. They are free from magnesium stearate, gluten, GMOs, hydrogenated fats, artificial colors, sweeteners, and preservatives. Among other things, one of the great things about Pure Encapsulations is not just the quality products, but the fact that they often provide a range of different dosages and sizes, which makes it easy to find the right product for the right patient, especially since we do a lot of testing and we figure out exactly what the patients need. So, for example, with DHEA, they offer 5, 10, and 25 milligram dosages in both 60 and 180 capsules per bottle size, which is extremely convenient. And now, back to our discussion. How much of the health content of olive oil is coming from the omega-9 fats versus the polyphenols?
From what we can see with the science, much of it is coming from the polyphenols. That seems to be where the smoking gun is in the Mediterranean diet. For years, they thought, well, it's because people are drinking wine with their meals and, yes, eat more vegetables, but it's the wine. No. Actually, you look at, I've actually talked to Mediterranean-based scientists out of Spain and so forth. They're going, no, it's not about the wine. Many of us don't even drink wine, but we're consuming massive amounts of olive oil. I did a lecture for the Institute for Functional Medicine here about 5 years ago, and I talked for about 30 minutes on olive oil, and I mentioned about the lifestyle of Grecians, Greek people, and how they eat and what they eat and how much. And this doctor came up at the break and said, you're the first person that's ever really described my lifestyle in Greece. We actually drink the olive oil. We actually drink it like a beverage. So I've gotten into the habit myself where in my morning breakfast, I'll have a little shot glass full of, very high phenol content olive oil, and I'll drink it like a drink. That's how a lot of people in the Mediterranean basis, that's how they do. So when you have a salad, it's not just drizzled with oil, it's actually like soaked in oil. And so I was having dinner with somebody at one of these meetings, and she actually just ate her salad, and then maybe it wasn't very socially nice, but she lifted up the bowl and actually drank all the olive oil right out of the salad bowl. I was like, go for it.
What about cooking with olive oil? I've heard people say, no, you should never cook with olive oil. The oil will get damaged. Cook with another oil and then use the olive oil just to put on the food afterwards. And then you look at the smoke point of extra virgin olive oil and it's 375. So,
exactly.
I've taken to, for a while I stopped using olive oil for cooking. I would only add it afterwards. And now like I'll make my eggs in olive oil. And, when I cook things on the stovetop, I try to use a lower or medium heat and I use olive oil. Is that a good thing to do?
Yes. In fact, that's what I do as well. This information that that shouldn't be cooked at all is really misinformation. If you look at the lifestyle of people living in Greece and Crete and Tunisia and so forth, they are cooking with their olive oil. Maybe not at high heat. Anything that's cooked with high heat is going to be oxidizing or damaging. But cooking your eggs with your olive oil at low to moderate heat is fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. People can argue, well, I use a saturated fat like ghee from butter or coconut oil. It's more stable. Yeah, theoretically, but it's not necessarily necessary to actually cook with that. So when I cook our vegetables, they're not going to be mushed out. They're going to be crunchy, and they're using olive oil when I cook with it, but it's not going to be at high heat. So you don't want your vegetables to be soft because you're losing the phytochemical content. The longer they cook, the more you lose your nutrients.
So what is considered high heat?
Well, I'd say anything over, you're getting above 300 degrees, you're moving towards high heat.
Okay, but olive oil extra virgin should be stable till what temperature?
I don't know if we have an exact number on that, but typically a low to moderate heat setting on your stove should be fine. And like I'm cooking my broccoli for, I'll bring the heat up, put the broccoli on there, and I'll cook it for about 2 to 4 minutes, and that's it, with the olive oil in there. Because anything beyond that, you're going to basically cooking the heck out of the phytochemical content.
Do you ever bake your vegetables?
I have, yes.
And then what temperature do you use for that?
Typically that 200 to 500, or 200 to 250. So it's a lower heat.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot lower than most people use.
Yes. You're going to get a much more healthy vegetable content as far as chemical content when you eat your food raw, but some vegetables are not really tasty, or they're not, people don't like eating certain raw vegetables. So they bake them or saute them. If you can bake or saute at a lower temperature, it retains the healthiness of that food. So if you want to be hardcore, you could be a raw vegan, sure, but it's a little challenging for most people to comply with that. They just get tired of chewing.
So let's talk about the health benefits of olive oil. Why don't we start with cardiovascular health?
Sure. Well, we know that it helps inhibit our platelet cells from aggregating or clumping. Our platelets are our cells that create clotting. So when you make your blood more thin, there's less tendency towards stroke and infarcts or clogging of the arteries. It helps reduce the cholesterol itself. It does reduce cholesterol, but more importantly, there's a bad cholesterol called LDL, low density lipoprotein. It reduces the oxidation of LDL. That's the key thing. So if you can reduce LDL oxidation, inhibiting the platelets from aggregating or clumping, it also helps inhibit oxidation these phenols act as antioxidants. So what they do is they go around and they scavenge free radicals like superoxide and hydroxyl radicals. There's also a type of free radical called induced nitric oxide. Nitric oxide has a two-edged sword. It can be really healthy, but unless it's induced by oxidizing agents, that creates more inflammation in the vessels of the circulatory system. So the phenol content in olive oil reduces this oxidation or peroxidation of fats and also free radicals themselves. So when you look at a lab test and we can measure these oxidized molecules, they go by the abbreviations of MDA and T-bars, you can actually measure these in your blood, and people who are ingesting higher levels of olive oil have lower levels of these oxidizing agents. That creates a better cardioprotective effect.
So same thing if we measure oxidized LDL on our cardiovascular panel?
That's correct. That's right. We also know that extra virgin olive oil has an anti-hypertensive, anti-blood pressure effect. There's many studies showing this, that you consume, say, 1,000 milligrams of this oleuropein or these phytochemicals for 6 weeks, you can decrease blood pressure by 10 points or 10 millimeters of mercury.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
That's very impressive within 6 weeks. There's been other studies that go as long as 2 years showing the same benefits. So one of the other benefits of olive oil is that actually it acts as an anti-inflammatory. There's a enzyme inside all of our cells called NRF2. And this enzyme creates a gene expression to create anti-inflammatory proteins, things that fight inflammation throughout the whole body. It turns out the phenol content in olive oil, specifically hydroxytyrosol, activates NRF2. It also inhibits an enzyme called LOX, or lipoxygenase. And this LOX enzyme is, if you have arthritis, your LOX enzyme is quite active and quite high. And so there are certain things in plants including olive oil, it can inhibit that enzyme. There's many other kind of molecules like that, but I'll stop there. We know that there's the disease called atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries. Olive oil has been shown to be anti-atherogenic. It prevents clogging of the arteries with plaques. So those are the key primary cardioprotective benefits of olive oil for heart disease.
I understand it raises HDL as well.
It does to a certain degree, yes. It's got that benefit. It definitely does.
Good. So what about cancer prevention? Does olive oil play a role in reducing our risk of cancer, or helpful as part of a healthy diet as somebody who's dealing with cancer?
I can answer that by looking at, we have cell culture studies that shows that it helps reduce what's called cell apoptosis, or programmed cell death. We know that in animal studies, it does the same thing. So it makes the cancer cells die off faster if they're elevating too high. We know that the olive oil phenol content from an epidemiology or population-based studies has been correlated with less cancer incidence. That doesn't necessarily show that's the reason why there's less cancer, but it's a strong correlation, just like with heart disease. So we have fewer studies with humans with olive oil showing anti-cancer as far as direct human studies. Most of it's with animals, cell culture studies, and epidemiology. But there is a strong evidence-based to answer. Your question is yes.
Right. Certainly it should be, olive oil should be part of a health promoting diet, including one that is designed to help reduce cancer risk.
Definitely so. What I'm most excited about is the neuron effect on the brain.
Okay.
It's very neuroprotective. It's anti-Alzheimer's. You look at there's a study done here called the 7-country study, and they looked at different countries and looked at what their disease patterns were. And they found that, these people have fewer levels of Alzheimer's disease and neurodegenerative diseases that are consuming higher levels of olive oil. And so we look into the science of it. We find that there's a protein in our nerve cells that if it becomes too high, it creates problems, and it's called amyloid beta, or AB. When it becomes high amyloid beta, it gets stuck together and it inhibits the nerves from working correctly, so you can't transmit neurotransmitters properly. The cells degenerate, and then the cells become tangled. There's little fibers called neurofibrils that become tangled. Well, it turns out the phenol content of olive oil inhibits amyloid beta and these neurofibril tangles from happening. That's not only true for olive oil, it's true for a lot of different vegetables and fruit contents, like in berries. But we know with olive oils, it's really very specific. There's some benefit, as I mentioned earlier, is that the olive oil fatty acids, the monounsaturated fatty acids, oleic acid, does stabilize the neuron membranes. So there's some other benefits that we don't understand, but the reduced risk of age-related cognitive decline is one of the things that I'm most curious about in those cultures that are ingesting higher olive oil content. So those are the biggest factors. There's some other tertiary
you
effects.
mentioned that famous 7-country study of Ansel Keys, which has been highly criticized by some in the functional medicine world.
I know. We all have an opinion. That's okay. There's a rose in every pile of information. So I look for the benefits. I can take apart the most highly acclaimed study and I can critique it. A study just came out here about 4 weeks ago on fish oil. It's called the Strength Study, showing, this shows that high doses of free fatty acids, EPA and DHA from fish oil, actually creates higher levels of cardiovascular risk. Well, if you dig into the study, there's actually some really good positive things out of the study that they didn't talk about in the media. And there's actually some issues with the study itself. So the problem with these studies, the media gets hold of it and it twists it, or the authors tend to interpret the statistics in a certain way to meet their definition of what they're trying to show. So, that's going to go on forever probably with research studies. Another area that I'm pretty excited about with extra virgin olive oil is anti-aging effect, and we call it cellular senescence. Cellular senescence is where the cells age too fast, Well, we're early on in this science, but there's an enzyme in all of our cells called AMPK. And this AMPK, it delays the aging of the cells. And it turns out the hydroxytyrosol, these phenol content, activates this AMPK. So we need more data on this, but it's an up-and-coming new area of science. Just like with bone loss, there's very good data in animals and now in humans showing that ingesting adequate levels of extra virgin olive oil helps prevent the loss of bone mass. And it does this by activating our cells called osteoblasts. Osteoblasts create new bone. And they do this through a variety of gene expression pathways and a variety of enzymes and creating new proteins. So bones are not just hard calcium, it's actually active enzymes and proteins and collagen and content. So it turns out that extra virgin olive oil activates this whole process. There was a study done for 24 months where they ingested 50 mLs of extra virgin olive oil. That's about 3.5 tablespoons of olive oil. And they followed the different levels of these compounds called osteocalcin and procollagen type 1, things that you can measure in the blood, in urine. They found that the levels were much more higher in the group that was ingesting extra virgin olive oil, and they actually had lower loss of bone mass. So people who are having osteopenia or osteoporosis, they should be ingesting high olive oil in their diet as one component. So it's not just about taking your calcium. It's much more, as you know, than just calcium.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned anti-aging. We just did a podcast about a new way to measure aging using methylation clock.
Yes,
and
very exciting.
Yeah, so that's some of the newest cutting edge way to try to figure out how well we're aging is by looking at the extent to which our DNA is methylated or not.
Right. That's correct.
Cool. And I also saw some information that olive oil may be beneficial for autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis as well.
Yeah, some early on information. It's still, we don't have hard data, but it's, as with most plant chemicals in our food, that it modifies our microbiome. And if our microbiome is healthy, there's going to be a reduced autoimmune response. So largely regulating autoimmunity is about modifying your microbiota. And we know that extra virgin olive oil, people ingesting that on human levels, but for sure in animals, we can actually improve our microbial diversity in a healthier way. We know that these hydroxytyrosol and other phytochemicals in extra virgin olive oil has a direct effect upon immune cells itself. So there's various types of immune cells in the gut, and I won't go into that, it's a long discussion, but basically you can improve the healthy proportion of, say, natural killer cells and versus dendritic cells, how this immune system is communicating with the rest of the body. So I'd like to say if you could just drink olive oil and your Hashimoto's thyroiditis will go away. No, we don't have that kind of data yet, but it's going to come. We'll see it in time if we keep doing research.
Cool. Good. So I think those are most of the questions that I had on my mind. Any other topics you'd like to mention?
By the last one would be something I use quite a bit in my practice is we focus quite extensively on the microbiome in our functional medicine practice. And we use a lot of antimicrobial agents that are plant-based, whether it's berberine or oregano and so forth. But the extra virgin olive oil polyphenols are very antibacterial against bacteria like H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori, which is correlated with acid reflux and GERD. We know there's certain other bacteria lower downstream called Klebsiella and Salmonella and E. coli and so forth. These unhealthy bacteria can be inhibited by extra virgin olive oil ingestion. Now, I should also say you can get some of this alloropine content through olive leaf extract.
I was just going to mention that. Exactly. I've seen that recommended for immune support. Exactly.
So the olive leaf extract is quite high in the alloropine. So that's another option for people who just they'll rather take a pill than eat their olive oil. I always recommend food first, supplement second, but it's an option. We don't know the dosage, but there was one study showing that about 1,200 milligrams of oleuropein per day was very antibacterial in the gut. We know it even kills Staphylococcus or Staph MRSA, this antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria that can be quite deleterious. So it has super benefits. The olive leaf extract has been known for years to be antiviral because of this oleuropein content. So the oleuropein within olive leaf and olive oil, they will go against, say, hepatitis or herpes or mononucleosis and a whole bunch of other strains of viruses. So it has other immune system benefits. So I use a lot of extra virgin olive oil and actually olive leaf extract just for an immune system component.
Which product do you like for olive leaf extract and what dosage?
I use a brand from called Biobotanical Research called Oliverex. And typically it's going to be...
Yeah, that's a company that makes the biocidin, right?
That's right. So they're not, I think their brand is nothing, special. It's just something I use biocidin. I buy other products from the company. So it's convenient to buy that. I've used other brands. There's a brand called NOW Now. It's very inexpensive. Their European product works good too. It's olive leaf extract. There's other 500 milligram capsules, and I think it's 6% oleuropein content. So I tell people taking 4 of them 3 times a day is therapeutic when there's a virus infection.
So 2,000 milligrams 3 times a day.
Correct. For therapeutic.
That sounds like fairly high dosage.
It is, but you need to really go after this. If you got an infection, you can't be, half stepping it through it. You need to be more therapeutic.
So will you use that along with other antimicrobials, like you mentioned, berberine and oregano, or will you use one product at a time?
No, I always use at least 2, if not 3 products at the same time, because I have found over the years that many of these bacteria and other microbial strains, whether it's yeast or viruses, they seem to become somewhat resistant after a few days to a few weeks of taking the same ingredient. You have to up the dosage even higher. So if we add in multiple different ingredients, whether it's berberine or neem leaf or some other product, I'm getting more clinical benefit as a double and triple bang all taken together. I tell people, just remind, this is short term. This is not for months and months and months.
So what is short term? How long do you?
It could be 2 to 6 weeks, depending upon how badly, what's going on. So if we find it.
What if they still have symptoms after that? Will you rotate different herbs or what will you do?
Well, usually I'm seeing my patients every 3 to 4 weeks for a consultation for functional medicine. So I'm going to be checking in. They often will tell me, I've still got all this bloating or I've still got all this discomfort. I say, okay, get some garlic or get some, high-end oregano oil type stuff, rotate to a different product and see if that makes a difference, because everybody's got a different microbiome. So we're finding we often need to rotate consistently, just like in the pharmaceutical world. If you just use the same antibiotic, all the time for the same patient, you're going to find antibiotic resistance. So you're going to rotate to a different antibiotic. Same thing in the plant world. Same thing.
Cool. Great. So how can listeners and viewers find out more information about you or get a hold of you?
You can go to our website. It's called Center for Wellbeing PC, centerforwellbeingpc.com.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
You bet,
I appreciate you giving us some quite a bit of detailed content about olive oil in a reasonable period of time. Thank you.
You're welcome.